Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about using arithmetic operators within Python. So in the last video we went through printing out some basic things to the screen, we got some user input, we used variables, but I didn't really go into much of an explanation of why we use them. So that's what we're going to be going through in the next few videos. So in this video, we're going to be starting off with some simple arithmetic operators that you would have seen in the likes of maths, such as the plus and minus operator, multiplication, division, modulus, things like that. But it's a little bit different when doing it on a maths paper versus programming using the operators. So let's start off by just printing out some really basic operators. To start off with, we can print out a number, such as the number 10, and we can run this and we can see that 10 gets displayed, but we can also add things to 10. So let's say we wanted to print out 10 plus 5, that would be equivalent to 15. So when we run our program, we can see 15 is being displayed. Now, along with using this plus operator, we can also use a minus operator, and this works the exact same way as it would in maths. It takes away 5 from 10 and it prints out 5. Now, the next thing we can do is use multiplication, but in maths you'd be used to using an x to represent multiplication. So in this case we want to multiply 10 by 5, but if we try and actually run this, it's not going to work because the syntax isn't correct. We don't use an x to multiply variables in Python, so the computer doesn't know what we're trying to do with x. It thinks x is its own variable. So if we want to multiply two numbers, we use the asterisk sign. So it's like a little star. And now if we go and run this, we can see that we get 50 because 10 times 5 is 50. Now if we wanted to go and divide, we could do this by using a forward slash. And if we type in this forward slash and run our program, and you'll notice that there's a slight difference between this number and the previous number that we got. So the previous number that we got, if we just go back to it, when we multiplied 5 by 10, we got 50. And it was just a whole number. There was no 50.0 or 50.00. It was just 50. But when we divide 10 by 5, our answer is 2.0. So 2 is a whole number. We don't really need that 0.0 there, but it's there as default. And we call this a float. So any number that we see that has a decimal point after it, we call that a floating point number, or a float. While a whole number that we've seen when we multiplied 10 by 5, we call that an integer. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're dealing with numbers yourself and you're writing your own programs. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the modulo operator. So the modulo operator is represented with a percent sign. And if we just go and run this, we'll see what we get. We get the number 0 as our output. And you might be wondering why we get 0 or what is the modulo operator. It's basically what you'd be familiar with as the remainder in maths. So what happens here is 5 divides into 10 twice, evenly. There's no remainder left over, so our modulo would be 0. But if we had a different number, so let's say we change this 5 to 4, 4 would go into 10 twice, and that would equal 8, but there'd be 2 left over, so our modulus would be 2. So I'm going to just run this to show you, and we can see 2 is left over. So we're going to put that back to 5 for now, and run it and we get 0. Now, if we were to change this here from 10 to a different number, like let's say 11, so 5 would go into 10 the same way as it did the last time, but now we've got a different number, we've got 11, so there's going to be 1 left over this time. So if I go and run this, we can see that 1 is left over. Now, these are some of the more basic ones that you would have used in maths. It's just using a slightly different syntax. A couple of them that you mightn't be familiar with is the increment and decrement operators that we can use in Python. So before we move on to that, I'm going to just show you another way in which we can use these numbers. So currently we just have print and then two numbers with an arithmetic operator. But these numbers don't have to be numbers within inside our print statement. These could be variables either. So you could have a variable called num1 and you could set that equal to 11, and then you could have a second num called num2 and have that set equal to 5. You don't have to be an expert with variables and know all the different types, but just know for this example we are storing these two numbers, 11 and 5, in two different variables, like two different boxes or somewhere that we can store our numbers. And rather than going and printing out the 11 and 5 or dividing the 11 and 5 within this print statement, we can use our variables. So we could say num1 and then some arithmetic operator such as maybe multiply. So we'd use our little asterisk and then we put in num2. And if we go and run this, we get the number 55 because 11 times 5 is 55. And you can do this with all the other operators. You can use it with the divide, you can use it with the plus and minus and everything else. But there's also the idea of using an increment and decrement operator. So to do this, we're going to delete these variables from our print statement for now. And for this example, we only really need one variable. So I'm going to get rid of this num2 because it's not needed. We want to use our increment and decrement operator. So to do this, we're going to use our variable and we're going to say num1, and then we want to add 1 to it. So if we wanted to add 1 to 11, we could do something like this, so assign it to 12, but this isn't what we want to do. This wouldn't work in the long term. If we want to add 1 to this variable multiple times, right, then we'd have to say 13 and 14 and 15 and so on and so on. Now another option would be to do this num1. So we've got num1 and we're going to set it to the same value, so num1 and then plus something, so plus 1, right? So if we go and run this, and inside our print statement we print out num1, we should get the number 12 because that's what we're doing. We're getting our number and then we're adding 1 to it. And if we were to copy this line and we were to bring it down to the next line, and we're doing the exact same thing. So it starts off as 11, then it should be 12, then it should be 13, and it should be printed out as 13. And if we run this, it's printed out as 13. But to shorten this down a little bit, if we get rid of this num1 and we put an equals in between the plus and the 1, and we can also just get rid of this equals as well, so that looks a lot shorter now. Now if we go and run this, we get our output as 12. And again, if we were to go and copy this and paste it into the next line and run it again, we would get the number 13. Now we can also use the minus operator for doing the exact same thing. So if we were to change this from a plus to a minus and run this, we get our number as 11 because we started off with 11. We've taken 1 from 11, which is 10, and then we've added 1 to 10, which is 11. And if we wanted to go and take away 1 from that twice, we could go and run this and get 9. Now what we can also do with this is, if we want to take away more than 1 at a time, maybe we wanted to take away 2, so we'll replace that 1 with a 2. So this time we would expect to get 8 because we're starting off with 11, we're taking 1 from it, which is 10, then we're taking 2 from it, which is 8, and we're getting 8 displayed out here.